Hey, welcome back. It is 104 on 570 News. This is the Throwback Thursday panel in studio with producer Haley Zimak. Well, we're going to be talking about the crude comments made by now an ex-Hydro One employee to Shauna Hunt, City News reporter. We spoke with Shauna. When was that? Was that on Tuesday now? Time just absolutely flies. Tuesday. It has to be Tuesday. I'm going with Tuesday. No, it was yesterday.
It happened Sunday night.
Doesn't matter.
So
it happened earlier this week.
Right, on Monday or Tuesday, and then the fallout has been substantial. As you mentioned, the Hydro One employee has lost his job. 4 guys in total have been identified. So I actually did reach out to MLSE earlier because they banned these 4 guys for at least a year.
We got a statement?
Unfortunately.
Oh, we didn't.
Basically just what we've said before, which is we do not condone this type of behavior. People will be kicked out and they'll be banned for at least a year. So I tried to get them on, but.
So 4 guys have been banned is what we're hearing, right? The 4 people that have been identified on video, they've all been banned from MLSE venues. They own, of course, the Toronto FC soccer team. They own the Toronto Maple Leafs. They own the Toronto Raptors. Anyway, yeah. So that's, they're obviously wanting to stay clear of the fallout that's coming from this. As is Hydro One. Hydro One fired the one gentleman. And you know what? I should stop calling him a gentleman because I actually got criticized for that, and rightfully so. An email came in saying, I'm just trying to be nice. That's how I just refer to people if I don't know their names, right?
Yeah, I know. And it's one of those awkward things. Because I actually remember hearing someone referring to, it was like a murderer or some terrible rapist, and I remember someone saying,
gentleman?
This gentleman. And that really piqued my interest as well because I know it's just a habit in,
that's
guy
all it
is so
yeah.
formal or man is so. But no, I get what you're saying. But yes, in this case, definitely not very chivalrous gentlemanly behavior.
This guy was fired by Hydro One. Sean Simos. Former Laurier student as well, went there from 2003 to 2005, played on the soccer team. And, here's my question, though. I mean, these other guys have all been identified. So is it only because Sean happened to work for a public company that he's lost his job? The other guys that have been identified, I guess their workplaces have released statements. I know the one guy, the very first guy with the TFC jersey that Shauna is talking to, he's been identified as well. He works for a private company, which have released a statement saying that they're investigating the issue. But we haven't heard him of losing his job.
No, and I think it depends on the language used as well, because if I'm not mistaken, and I've watched this video so many times, so I should have it completely memorized by now. But Sean, who's at the end, he's a slimmer guy with the yellow jersey, the Arsenal
jersey.
Exactly. Yeah. His language was really vulgar, right? It was bleeped out a lot, mentions a, sex toy being, by her face.
Didn't actually say the phrase.
Didn't say the phrase. But, the F word was in there and other kind of vulgarity. So I think that's why, because, and it's so funny, and you and I have talked about this, is that he interjects himself into this fray, right?
He had nothing to do with it originally.
That's the thing. She's talking to these 2 guys, right? The one guy runs by. He's gone. He does it. And you can see him in a few different camera shots just waiting there with the guy with the sunglasses, right? She talks to the guy with the sunglasses for a little bit. He takes them off and says, well, where else am I going to do it? And he says it's substantial, which makes absolutely no sense at all, but fine.
Substantial.
And then she's talking to him, and he pulls her attention away. Do you know what I mean? And she even at one point kind of turns back to finish, and he keeps on going. So it's like not even, you must feel so awful to be him and in this situation, but you completely, of course, you did it to yourself. But I mean, he drew that attention to himself.
He did. He really did. He was just lurking. He was waiting. He wasn't on camera at first. I mean, he was on camera, but he wasn't near the microphone.
No.
And then he just kind of put himself in there.
He wanted to get out there. He wanted to say this. He wanted to have this conversation. Like he really, it looks like he thought it was funny and he wanted to be a part of it.
And I think it's important to talk about just that because context is very important, right? Because people have been saying, it's ridiculous. He was fired for this crude phrase that's this trend that's been happening for the past several years on YouTube, and the people are saying, well, he didn't actually say the phrase, and all the backlash is about the phrase, how it's sexism and how it's rooted in misogyny and how it needs to stop and how it's harassment and how it's pointed at the reporters, but he didn't actually say the phrase, so why has he been fired? And I think it's important to give context in what you're saying, to your point, Haley, that he was there waiting to do it. And how do we know that? Because he interjects and says, as soon as Shauna starts questioning the first guy that she's questioning, and he doesn't like something that she says to him or that she asks him or she's challenging him, right? Well, why would you do this? Or, you're going to humiliate me on television? Why would you do this? And he comes in almost in defense of the first guy and says that he effing loves it and that he respects it and that his mother would find it very funny.
And you're lucky it's not in England where this was by the, reporter's head. Like, just really condescending, really rude.
Yeah, we have a clip of it ready, Kat. Okay, so this is this Shauna right here? Shauna Hunt here with City News. Take a listen.
You would humiliate me on live television?
Not you.
Are you actually filming this?
Well, because you know what? I'm sick of this. I get this every single day, 10 times a day by rude guys like
I'm
you.
sick of it.
Hilarious. I don't care what you say.
It has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with
when you talk into my microphone and say that into my camera to viewers at the station I work at, it is disrespectful and degrading to me.
I don't care. I don't care. It's not to you.
Yeah, yelling, I don't care. It's not to you. Look, here's what I want to say, because I've received so many emails about this, and both good and bad. People that are saying, hey, good on Shauna for turning the tables around on these guys and finally standing up for herself and all that. But also people who just don't understand why someone can be fired if they're off work. If it's after 9 to 5 and you're at a game, you're enjoying yourself, you should be able to do that. This is what people are telling me. You should be able to do that, and there shouldn't be any consequences with the way you act.
But we've looked into that, and that's not the case.
That's not the case. We spoke with an employment lawyer on the show yesterday, Steve Rudner, who said that Stuart Rudner, who said that absolutely you can, because it comes down to one thing. And it's always been the case. It has always been the case that your actions outside of work can get you fired. The only difference now is that social media exists. That's the only difference. And so you have to be extra careful. Whether you agree with you should or shouldn't have to be extra careful, it doesn't matter, because you do.
You do.
Because as soon as it becomes a public relations nightmare for X company, it is well within their rights to say, we don't want to have anything to do with you, because they can just point to their code of conduct.
Yeah,
and code of conduct is all-encompassing now.
That's exactly
it. That's the thing. It's all-encompassing. It's the way you act. It's the way you portray yourself. It's what you say. It's your thoughts. It's your views. And there's this broad conversation happening about sexual harassment and shaming and all of that stuff. And if you're not aware of that, by the way, this guy... 2014 Sunshine List, senior position at Hydro One, financial assistant engineer, quite frankly should know better.
Yeah, you're making over $100,000 a year.
Clearly educated, clearly smart.
Went to Laurier.
Should know better.
Yeah.
And so it does matter how you conduct yourself, because if there's video evidence, why would I want to have any association with you? I'm sorry, Haley, but if you work for me, and you conduct yourself in a way that everybody will say that is ridiculous, and how dare that person, be harassing somebody as they're trying to work, I have the right to say, I don't want to have anything to do with you.
Well, that's exactly
making me look
it.
bad.
And especially if it's a company, if it's something like Hydro One, right? Obviously. Or we talked earlier about in Quebec, right? Someone worked for the city that was brandishing the chainsaw, got fired. I understand that's more violent, but there's been cases in private stores as well. There was a guy who was creeping this girl and it got out of hand. He worked at a big and tall clothing store, right? And he got let go because employers and companies are just not going to take that.
This is Bill on the line. Hi, Bill.
I'm back again. Two meaningful words. After I first say I agree with everything you guys say. Meaningful words, Rob Ford.
Rob Ford, okay.
Rob Ford did pretty much exactly what this drunken slug in Toronto did. On camera multiple times, sexual conversation, attacking people verbally, racist, sexist, everything in the world, and look what happened to Rob. Nothing at all.
Well, I wouldn't say nothing. The media, went after him. His reputation was shot.
He was crucified.
Yeah, he was crucified.
Mayor.
Yeah, and he's no longer mayor.
Never lost his job, and the only reason that he lost no longer mayor is because he developed cancer, and didn't get there and gave up on running for mayor.
Yeah. So
I mean, I'm not saying that. I mean, I agree. I think the reporter handled herself magnificently, and I think that this guy and maybe these guys got exactly what they deserved. But I think it certainly sets a really interesting benchmark where anybody can be mouthy in public with no respect to their job and still end up somehow getting fired. I'm not saying he shouldn't. I'm not saying he shouldn't have been fired, but I think it's just an interesting benchmark because, and again, Rob Ford, he didn't get fired.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting point. Thanks, Bill, for the phone call. I appreciate that. Let me just say that. So what Bill's getting is that people are being treated differently, and
I'm
that
glad
may be the case.
Yeah, and I'm glad he brought that up. If I can just interject, the TSN woman, Britt, what's her last name? Remember
ESPN.
ESPN, sorry.
Yeah.
And she just went off on a woman who had impounded her car and said, made fun of her teeth and her education and called her fat. And was just ripping into her, right? That was huge. That's gone away relatively quietly. She was only suspended for a week, and she has a high-profile on-air position. So it is a good point when you bring up different, and it's like the perfect storm, right? This story has everything. It's got the sexism, right? It's got the female reporter. It's got the drunken, stupid guy who's acting idiotic. It has this phrase that I think people are sick of, and it's kind of come together to be the perfect story, whereas he's the poster child now. He's the poster boy.
I'm so glad you brought that
up.
I'm so glad you brought up poster child because any way you look at it, that is how things change. Mm-hmm. When someone, and by the way, it wasn't Shauna's intention, and she said this. She's been vocal about this because I can't even imagine what she's going through right now. She's probably getting attacked by emails and all this. You got this guy fired, ruin his life, and all this. It was not her intention to get this guy fired. She faces this multiple times a day trying to do her job. I mean, just imagine trying to do your job and having somebody hurl vulgarities at you because they think it's funny. If you don't understand the difference between a prank and harassment, I don't know. I have nothing to say to you. If you cannot, in your mind, say a prank is this is harassment. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what I can. Clearly, I'm not going to change anyone's mind, and I have nothing to say to that person. This is so clearly harassment. This is so clearly done for the purpose of perpetuating this and having it go on.
Well, and what other job is it appropriate that you can run up to someone and ruin what they're doing? Do you know what I mean? You could never go into an office building or, a police station or a hospital and rip out their work from underneath them or berate them or get in their face. I've been so frustrated. I've never had that phrase personally, but I've had people, when I was doing Rogers TV, they walk through the shots, or if you're out for 570, they'll grab the mic flag or they'll grab into it and say something stupid, or they'll swear in the background, And it's just like, and this is why I'm so proud of her. She's a fellow Fanshawe grad actually. And before she came on with you, I was chatting with her and she was just like, oh my God, obviously I had no idea it would get this big, but she's like, Haley, I'm so sick of it. I'm so sick and tired of trying to do my job and be a professional, and this continues to happen. So as a fellow woman in this industry, I'm so glad I'm 100% behind, because nowhere else in any other industry is this appropriate or allowed. So, some people say it's harsh. It is harsh, but maybe this is what will make it finally stop.
Yeah. All right, so let me throw something else at you here, and to Bill's point about people being treated differently. And by the way, Bill, you're right. People are treated differently. I don't think that's fair, but I also don't think the media let Rob Ford off the hook. In fact, we were told to stop talking about it because we talked about it so much.
Death, yeah.
And we definitely did not let Rob Ford off the hook. Elizabeth May and what she said during her after she got up on stage and basically said that the entire federal cabinet, that Omar Khadr has more class than the entire federal cabinet. So some people are saying, what about Elizabeth May? That's pretty offensive too. We'll talk about that when we come back on 570 News.
Sports at 15 and 45 past the hour. This is 570 News.
123, welcome back. Here on 570 News, the Throwback Thursday panel with producer Haley Zimak. All right, so this crude phrase that's been going around, we know that Hydro One has fired Sean Simos for the way he acted and hurled some vulgarities and just, I guess his views on On that crude phrase, the F for right in the P phrase, and let me throw. So Bill called and brought up Rob Ford, which I think is interesting, and it's something worth talking about because people are treated differently, and it happens everywhere. Every workplace has people who are treated differently. We kind of do that in society. I don't know why that is, but we do. So let me point to now the head of the Green Party, Elizabeth May, who now admits that in retrospect that her funny speech wasn't so funny. Elizabeth May has apologized after using profanity and insulting the federal cabinet over its treatment of Omar Khadr, who was freed on bail last week in Alberta despite government attempts to keep him behind bars. She said, she dropped an F-bomb, basically said that Khadr has more class than the whole Harper cabinet. This was at the annual parliamentary dinner, which is meant to be funny. It's meant to let loose. We spoke with Cormac McSweeney, who was there, our Parliament Hill reporter, who said that everybody dropped F-bombs. Justin Trudeau gave a speech and dropped an F-bomb. Who else was there? The Prime Minister wasn't there, but other people, other cabinet members came up and were funny. And it's basically like, let's, be self-deprecating, make fun of ourselves type of thing. She came up and the room died in silence because she goes, hey, by the way, Omar Khadr has more F in class than the entire Harper cabinet, and the room fell silent. Was that too much? And why is that okay to say for Elizabeth May? And why does she still have her job? I mean, should that room just take it? Should they be used to that?
Yeah, and again, it depends on like the person and the circumstances as well, doesn't it? I've met Elizabeth May in a few different locations when she's going through and doing her press tours, and she's always struck me as a really nice,
she's been on the show,
friendly,
exactly,
kind, genuine person. So I think it's quite apparent in that video, if you get a chance to watch it, that she's had a lot to drink. Inhibitions are clearly, down. It's Lisa Raitt, I believe, right, who pulls her off the stage.
Lisa Raitt comes up and says, okay, that's enough.
And she said, she's admitted, she's like, look, I try to be funny. I try to be edgy. We've heard that these gallery press dinners they're full of just that, reporters, right? I mean, so I think maybe people are a bit, you want to make headlines in the right way. It's probably a lot of pressure. She'd had too much to drink. Clearly that was her thought and her opinion, and she did not execute it well. It fell flat for a few reasons. I think, because she is the leader of the Green Party. Perhaps she doesn't have the same type of respect or isn't on the same level in a lot of people's eyes. It's Omar Khadr, right? So it's an extremely controversial person right there. And then plus you're demeaning the federal cabinet by saying that this guy and everything that he's done and gone through and everything has more class than the government that currently, rules Canada. Like there's a few reasons in there, I think, why it just didn't go well. Plus, she was kind of drunk and sloppy and threw it in there as an afterthought. And
see, the video does seem to show it that way. When we spoke with Cormac, he told me he didn't think that she was, drunk or had been drinking or anything. And look, the champagne and the wine pour at dinners like that, and C-Mac said that too. But he and by the way, her and Lisa Raitt hugged it out after. Mm-hmm. So it seemed to be like a no hard feelings type of thing, right?
It is interesting how quickly it's gone away, though. And that's a lot of comments on the stories. They said, if this was Prime Minister Harper who'd said something like this, who'd, used a swear word or, put something so controversial up or compared another, that media would not let it go.
Resignation. Yeah.
Perhaps. And this was gone in like a day? And it's probably interesting. It's probably the timing of it, right? Because then the Shauna thing happened, which is a way bigger, way sexier story. Everyone gets on board with that and they forget about Elizabeth May's little faux pas. So she's probably thrilled.
At the same time, Elizabeth May is a smart woman, and I question whether she knew exactly what she was doing. Going up and saying, I'm going to drop this bomb at the end. Hey, at least now the Green Party is being mentioned. At least people are now talking about Elizabeth May.
Getting some Google hits, right? Now people know if they didn't know before Elizabeth May is the Green. Yeah,
she's a smart woman.
That's a good point.
And it's about getting your name in the headlines.
But then isn't that the whole, no press is bad press or no,
Well, bad press is any press is good press. Yeah.
I don't know though. In this day and age with social media and everyone jumping on board and being so critical, I don't know if it is necessarily, but that is an interesting point.
So imagine going for surgery on one body part and realizing another body part had been operated on. How would you react if that happened? It did happen, and a doctor has been suspended And we'll tell you about that when we come back here on 570 News.
This time of year, they're like ninja storms that cause havoc. Be prepared with the 570 Extreme Weather Center, exclusively on 570 News.
All right, 135. Is that Weird Al? Yeah, that's Weird Al. Welcome back to 570 News. Imagine going in for surgery on one body part and realizing another body part had been operated on. That's what happened to a female patient after a Montreal surgeon operated on her big toes instead of her baby toes. John Robert Sutton pleaded guilty to the 2012 incident and was suspended for 1 month. The patient's lawyer had asked for 3 months, but it was determined that would affect patient wait times as he sees about 20 people a day. He realized the mistake a week later and said it was possible he read the schedule instead of the consent form. It should also be noted that this was his first infraction in 40 years. Duncan Embury joins us now to share his expertise in medical malpractice suits and explains just how often these things happen. Thanks so much for doing this, Duncan. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. And yourself?
I'm doing very well. This has been getting a lot of traction now, mainly because people are talking about the 1 month suspension. I think that's kind of what's been at the center of the controversy, if you want to call it that. Look, the bottom line is this doctor, this surgeon, operated on the wrong body part. And I've been seeing comments, Duncan, like, oh, who cares? It's just your toes. People should care, shouldn't they?
I think they should care, and I think it raises a larger issue because, of course, it may not always be the toes.
Right. How often does this happen?
Well, I don't know that anyone keeps accurate statistics of how often, a surgery on the wrong body part happens, but presumably it's often enough that there's certainly some move to change it. In about 2010, a lot of hospitals in Ontario, anyway, came up with a surgical safety checklist to prevent this very thing from happening.
Right, and in this particular case, he said that he may have read the schedule wrong, and that has a lot of people scratching their heads as well. And there was also a comment made that I found very interesting, and I guess that was after the court case. But the comment was, the surgery also happened very early in the morning, and I'm not sure how that's relevant to the case. Did you see that comment?
I did see that comment, and frankly, I would agree with you. I'm not sure how the time of day of the surgery should affect whether or not it's done properly and on the right body part.
Mm-hmm. Now, there was nothing malicious about this, though, right? I mean, this was a kind of I don't know what you call it, chalk it up to an honest mistake type of thing. You read the schedule wrong?
Yeah, I certainly would, from everything I've read, I don't think anyone would suggest there's anything malicious about it. I mean, you've got a doctor who's been practicing for 40 years and doing it presumably very well. Again, I think it comes really back to the need to have and to properly use a surgical safety checklist. And
so what does that checklist entail?
Well, what the checklist entails, and it came out of an urging from the World Health Organization in 2009, it has kind of three parts. There's a preoperative part, an operative part, and a postoperative part. And for the purposes of this discussion, I think really the key is the preoperative part. What it requires is that the surgery be checked with the patient before, on the morning of surgery or the day of surgery before the procedure started. And what that does, or what it should do, is make sure that the schedule and the consent and the procedure all line up to be the same thing.
Right. That way, and by the way, what that also does, I think, is that you still make sure that the person wants to do it, right? Like that there are no second thoughts, right? It's like a very last, okay, so this is what we're doing.
Yeah, I think that's also right, because you're talking to them at that point, presumably, about the consent as well. And if there's any issues at that point, they're going to come to the fore.
What do you find the reaction has been like in this particular case? I mean, again, I find that everybody's talking about the 1 month. Some people are saying, well, 1 month, what does that do? Other people are saying shouldn't have been suspended at all, that maybe a fine would have been acceptable. I mean, what have you been seeing in terms of how people are reacting to this?
Well, I mean, certainly the reaction that I've read about, it seems like that's the issue that's caught the public's attention. I think what certainly catches lawyers' attention who practice in this area, and probably doctors' attention as well, is, it underlines the need to make sure that we are properly using a surgical safety checklist, because otherwise, this is a human system and mistakes can happen.
And the next time, it might not be toes, it might be something else, and then you start running into real problems. In terms of the 1 month suspension, do you think that in this particular case that was the right call?
That's a hard question to comment on. I don't think that the length of suspension is going to change the likelihood of it happening again. I mean, presumably, this surgeon, I have no doubt, feels very bad about the mistake that occurred, and presumably it wouldn't happen again regardless of whether suspended or not. So I think to suspend for longer may not really do any public service.
Right. We're on the line with Duncan Embury. He is sharing his expertise in medical malpractice suits with us after a surgeon in Montreal, John Robert Sutton, pleaded guilty to a 2012 incident. And he was suspended for a month, ended up operating on the wrong body part. So, I mean, in terms of how often these things happen, I mean, you said nobody really keeps track of this. But what about his clients? When something like this happens, what do clients typically seek out?
In terms of his patients, you mean?
Yeah, no, in terms of people that have had this happen to them, what are they usually looking for afterwards?
Well, I think it really depends on how the mistake may have affected them. And as you rightly say, where this, it can involve toes, it can involve any body part, and it can cause a serious adverse event to people. And in those circumstances, often they do proceed with lawsuits because they require some care as a result of what's happened.
Mm-hmm. What constitutes, on a whole, medical malpractice?
Well, the simplest definition is where the medical treatment provided falls below the reasonable standard of care to be expected of a doctor in similar circumstances and with similar training.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, you know what? I think it's. Does this set any kind of precedent at all? I mean, a 1 month suspension. Do you think that does anything in terms of a precedent?
No, I think to the extent it sets a precedent, I think what it does is draws attention again to the importance of proper checklists. I mean, when we talk about airline incidents, the airline industry has come up with a checklist to govern pretty well everything that happens in the air, and the reason is to make sure that the frailties of a human system don't cause adverse outcome. And I think the same needs to be hammered home more in the medical profession.
Yeah, I mean, and you mentioned we clearly have that. We have this checklist that you talked about. So, I mean, the conversation then eventually, turns into whether or not the suspension, the 1 month suspension, should it have been more? Should it have been less? Should a fine been okay? If somebody, and what also I find interesting is that during, I guess, the court case, the doctor had said that he doesn't remember how the whole thing went down. I mean, can I ask you to kind of give me your opinion on that? What do you make of that? I mean, he said that he doesn't remember how it all happened.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure. We're talking about an incident now that happened in 2012, of course, and I'm not sure what the passage of time was by the time it got to the court or wherever it got to. And so it's certainly not unreasonable that people's memories do fade. And when you're dealing with a surgeon who has a busy practice, they may not remember exactly where they read the information before they went into the operating room.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a very interesting case, Duncan, and I thank you so much for your time. Appreciate this.
My pleasure, Eric.
All right. Duncan Embry right there is a lawyer, expertise in medical malpractice suits. And this is a case out of Montreal, happened in 2012, where John Robert Sutton, the surgeon, basically operated on the wrong body part. A female patient wanted an operation on her big toes. Instead, it happened on her baby toes. And he was suspended for 1 month because of this. And I'm wondering what you think about that. I mean, is a 1 month suspension sufficient for operating on the wrong body part? I mean, I know in this particular case, we're talking about, toes, and that's been said a lot. It's been talked about a lot. People are saying, well, what's the big deal? I mean, it's just some toes. Yeah, sure, it's shouldn't have happened. I'm sure he feels bad for it. 1 month is fine. Some people are saying he shouldn't have been suspended. People are saying a fine would have been something that they would be okay with. 1 month for operating on the wrong body part, it's a suspension. And, I find the reasoning for that to be interesting as well. The court said that, if they suspended him for longer, the patient's lawyers wanted 3 months, that they would actually be affecting patient wait times, as he sees about 20 people a day. So they're saying, well, we can't suspend him for longer because what about his patients? Very interesting. 1 month suspension for, is that sufficient for operating on the wrong body part? We'll take calls next when we come back here on 570 News.
Business at 26 and 56 minutes past the hour. This is 570 News.
I think what certainly catches lawyers' attention who practice in this area, and probably doctors' attention as well, is, again, it underlines the need to make sure that we are properly using a surgical safety checklist, because otherwise, this is a human system and mistakes can happen.
We continue with the Eric Drozd Show on 570 News.
Duncan Embry right there, a medical malpractice lawyer. We're talking about the case of John Robert Sutton, who owns a private clinic and pleaded guilty to the Quebec College of Physicians for an incident. It happened at St. Mary's Hospital in 2012. According to the court decision, the cause seems to have come from confusing the medical terms for baby toes and for big toes. The difference being that a bunion means inflammation of the bone at the base of a person's big toes, and a bunionette means the same, but for a person's little toes, as it was explained by the court. So this woman wanted to have the operation on her big toes, and it didn't happen, and so he's been suspended for a month. And my question to you is that sufficient for operating on the wrong body parts? This is Alex on the air now. Hi, Alex. Go ahead.
Well, I would have thought there would have been some compensation involved. So the problem is our system is run by the government, and like most government agencies of all stripes and colors, there's no accountability when you do something wrong. I guarantee you, if you started a show and just asked people to call in on the horror stories at our local hospitals, your eyes would be completely wide open. I can't tell you how many. I know someone's been killed at the hospital. My own daughter was almost killed at that hospital. I almost got killed at a London hospital. Because it's government run, they hide all this stuff. It would just shock everybody. But I guarantee you, have a show sometime and ask just people to call up and say the horror stories that they've encountered at our local hospitals. And, unfortunately, like everything government, because it's government run, there's very little accountability.
So, I mean, okay, I gotcha, Alex. How would have it, if it was run privately, is that some magical cure? I mean, how would that fix things?
Well, it's not a magical cure. Nothing's ever perfect. It's always run better when there's accountability involved. And unfortunately, with governments, you have government unions, and everyone knows that. There's just no accountability for it. Like I said, for example, if that doctor had done that in the States, well, his liability insurance would have gone up, right? He may have lost his license to practice at that hospital. He might have had to move to a different hospital. There's accountability built into the system when it's private. When it's government, all that accountability goes out the window.
Interesting perspective, Alec. Thanks for the call. Appreciate that. 519-570-2545 locally. Out of town, 1-800-570-5715. Star 570 by cell. The email's eric@570news.com. What I find interesting about this case is that is what the doctor said. He said that he doesn't remember, and I get, it happened in 2012. The court case decision comes down now, so time passes. But there's something about a doctor saying, I don't exactly remember why I did the surgery the wrong way, or I operated on the wrong body part. I don't remember what happened. Something about that just doesn't sit right with me. I mean, somebody says, well, people mix up their words all the time and people forget things, and I get that. But this is a surgery that we're talking about. This is a surgeon that we're talking about, and I get that he sees 20 people a day. And it's his clinic, and maybe, he does it so often that sometimes he forgets stuff or whatever. But that's where there needs to be, to Alex's point, accountability. There needs to be things in place so that this kind of stuff doesn't happen. And the people saying that, well, it's toes, what's the big deal? This is being blown out of proportion. It's in this particular case, it's toes. Maybe it's something else in a different case. And, once something is operated on, it's operated on. And if it's not what you wanted, that shouldn't be happening. I mean, it just shouldn't be happening. So this is there was a letter to the patient, by the way, and the medical examiner wrote that other possible factors included a breakdown in communication between staff and the timing of the surgery in the early morning on the day in question, which I don't understand why that's relevant at all. So the surgery happened early in the morning. So was the doctor not awake yet? Or, I mean, I don't know why that is relevant at all. So this doctor was suspended for 1 month. Some people saying too lenient. Some people saying shouldn't have been suspended at all. And some kind of fine should have been associated with it as well. But in any case, this doctor, John Robert Sutton, pled guilty to the Quebec College of Physicians for the incident. Again, it happened in 2012. So there you go. Thank you for the phone calls on that. That's it for us. We'll be back tomorrow beginning at 10. All News Afternoons is coming up next here on 570 News. Christine Clark and Sydney Eggett standing by. It's next here on 570 News.